I don't know how to do that. Okay, listen, I don't know how to do that.
I'm gonna go do my actual job. Babe, you wanna go to the park and film with me? No, literally, just stop. I'm not doing this anymore. Okay. I'm gonna get the car started. I love you. Stay safe, okay?
I fucking hate you, but I love you. I'm bad at keeping my emotions bubbled. You're good at being perfect. We're good at being troubled. Yeah.
He's so sick
I fucking hate you.
of that fucking psycho. It's just like, man, if she would just leave, us alone, that's all I need. That would just make everything better instantly if she was just gone. I don't know what she's getting out of staying here. I don't know what she's getting out of hanging around us. I'm sorry. Okay. Work mode. I'm gonna just read through the script real quick. I'm just gonna go off of memory. Okay. There have been a lot of musical obsessions over my life. Roger Waters, John Lennon, Jim Morrison, Aphex Twin, Tupac, Mac Miller, Car Seat Headrest, Pierce Edens, the Stereophedelics. My memory of my childhood is, like, scarily fuzzy, but I can pinpoint exactly what was going through my head when I first dove into all of these different artists. How my life was changing, how my perspective was developing, what I thought the meaning of life was at all these different points. These things were all, at least in part, influenced by who I was listening to at the time. It was, like, kind of the only thing that kept me going for those first 18 years. School, friendships, family moments, even my girlfriends and boyfriends, nothing mattered more to me than my music. So, when Roger Waters told me that religion was just a tool of the state, you bet your ass I became an atheist. When Tupac said that the ruling class invents conflict between the lower and middle classes so that they can run off with the money, you bet your ass I became a communist. When MF Doom told me to take things less seriously and just have fun, you bet your ass I became a nihilistic optimist. I say all of this to demonstrate how seriously I take my music, how much it's always meant to me, how many artists completely changed me to my very core, so that you'll know that I've put a lot of thought into it when I say that Tyler, the Creator, is my favorite musician of all time. So, in this video, I'm going to be going through Tyler's discography and doing what I've always done with it, introspecting. I think I'm going to end up being maybe even more honest than my audience is used to today. I've been going through some things, and with how long I've wanted to make a video about Tyler's work, I can't think of any better way to talk about my situation with my audience. Let's see if these albums can help me cope. I was a little late to the party. I didn't get into Tyler until a little bit before his 5th album, Flower Boy, came out. For those who don't know, Flower Boy's the album where Tyler came out as bi, and when you know it, I had just recently realized that my couple gay experiences weren't just a fluke and that was just part of who I was right around the time that album dropped. As it turns out, every album that Tyler's dropped since then seems to have come out at the perfect time for me when I could really relate to it. So, what I really want to do here is talk about each album. We're going to briefly go over the mixtapes, Bastard and Goblin, but to be honest, there's not too much that I have to say about those, so let's just get started and we can work our way to the meatier albums. Like I said, I didn't get into Tyler until his 5th album, so while I can't say, yeah, Goblin came out at the perfect time for me, what I can say is, holy shit, I wish I had this when I was in high school. My high school cynicism was scored by Pink Floyd telling me that all of this was a waste of time because I was just being indoctrinated into a system that consumes everything it touches. Now, that's true about school, even when you take Thatcher out of the equation, but man, all Pink Floyd taught me was that I should be depressed about it. If I had Tyler's early albums in my headphones back then, the lesson I would have learned would be fuck all the bullies and all the teachers, be proud of being a freak, and don't be depressed because you're different. To be honest, it's pretty easy for me to believe that I would have gotten a backbone way earlier in my life if I was hearing kill people, burn shit, fuck school, instead of shown how to feel good and told to feel bad. I've got that backbone now, but that's a relatively recent development. To be even more honest, having a backbone a couple years ago probably would have spared me from the whole situation that's motivating this video. I'll get into that stuff later, but just stick with me for now while I lay down the groundwork with these first 3 albums. I'll be quick about it. Really, what grabs me about Bastard, Goblin, and especially Wolf is the aesthetics of it all. The music videos, the YouTube videos, the merch, the concepts, Odd Future, Loiter Squad, Camp Flog Gnaw, they all play a role in what these 3 albums are really all about for me. This juxtaposition comes up immediately upon finding the first mixtape, Bastard, online. Weird, unsettling imagery of a bunch of kids with some uncanny photoshopping, mixed with that goofy-ass taco truck font. See, these first 2 albums are all about that juxtaposition, where all these dark, intrusive thoughts are turned into edgy jokes, rhymes and wordplay turn murder and kidnapping into punchlines. It's like the old Slim Shady thing, except for 2 major distinctions that elevate the music and take it a notch above just shock value with some transcendental Dre beats. First off, the instrumentals just feel uncanny. Any rapper in the world could sound good over any of the beats that Dre produced for Eminem, but only Tyler and a couple of his friends can really body the instrumentals on Bastard and Goblin. Weird chords, weird instruments, weird MF Doom-inspired drums. It all shares the same jazz and R&B roots that most of rap music can be traced back to, but it's just different sounding. To this day, even Tyler has never really made anything that sounds like these first 2 albums do. It all works musically, albeit in a really dissonant way, but it falls into this uncanny valley of sound in a way that recontextualizes those edgy jokes. The fact that it all sounds so weird both re-emphasizes the larger message of fuck everybody else, do what makes you happy, and makes you think, or at least feel, like maybe this guy's serious. Maybe he does literally have a plan to kill Bruno Mars. Tyler's not actually that twisted, but man, some people are. Secondly, there's this little rhyme scheme trick that Tyler does a lot back then, where he sort of backs up what he's saying, making it feel a little bit more legitimate, no matter how ridiculous whatever it is. Take a listen to this.
For some reason I liked it and it was really exciting. Couldn't stop the addiction. And the irony is, a couple junkies went missing and I know right where they're hiding.
See, a more traditional rhyme scheme would end with something that rhymes with and the irony is. But by bringing back the previous bar's B rhyme, liked it and exciting, with hiding, it kind of sneaks up on you. And a lot of the time I hear him doing this trick, it's like I can't even immediately pinpoint what that last phrase was rhyming with unless I'm paying closer attention, because my brain was just primed to hear a different rhyme. But I know it rhymes with something that I heard not too long ago. Not only does it just tie the verse together in a nice and unique way, but it gives the verse that vibe, like it really doesn't care if I'm internalizing the lyrics or not. It all just feels so matter-of-fact, which is emphasized especially in this example by the cold drop into the chorus after that last bar. Like I said, it's sort of a vague, abstract, vibey thing, but the confident, uncaring energy that this rhyme scheme gives off just adds to that feeling, as if someone's listening to it and they don't like it, they're the one with the problem. It's like it's saying, you either get what I'm going for or you're completely irrelevant. That's kind of a philosophy I can really get behind as an artist. I make these videos for myself and for the people who like them, and that's literally it. I don't think about expanding my audience for even a second. I just don't give a fuck about that. So you've got all that darkness, all that fuck you. You've got Tyler eating a cockroach and hanging himself in the Yonkers video, or fucking a doll in a sex dungeon in VCR. But that's contrasted by the bright, silly, and sometimes sentimental side of the Odd Future era. Songs like Her or Bastard or Ass Milk turning the tone from anger to pure sadness or goofiness. After hearing these two albums, you really get a thorough look at this whole spectrum of where Tyler's head was at the time. We see what makes him mad, happy, depressed, scared. We see what he thinks is funny. We see how he copes with his anger and depression. These two albums, more than almost any other album I can think of, feel like perfect representations of what it's like to actually be in another person's brain, in a way that I think is really special. Then that feeling is just elevated by the merch, the videos, and all that stuff. When you first dive into Odd Future, you really are just entering Tyler's world, and it's an interesting-ass world to be in. Okay, one more album. I say that Bastard and Goblin put you in the mind of the artist better than almost any album, but truthfully, I only had one other album in mind. Wolf, the third album, and if you ask me, the answer to everything that Bastard and Goblin were setting up. It's just the final word on what these two albums were trying to achieve. Wolf is long, like 20 minutes longer than any of his other albums, unless you count the extended version of Call Me If You Get Lost. It's weird, it's varied, it captures like a dozen different genres and subgenres of R&B and rap. It's uncanny, it's sad, it's funny, it's angry, it's forgiving. It takes that idea of putting you into Tyler's mind and it turns it into this giant musical epic. Wolf, more than any other Tyler album, feels like an odyssey. It feels like this polished, refined version of everything that Bastard and Goblin were, while also foreshadowing a lot of the ways that Tyler would elevate his work over the rest of his career. If you ask me, Tyler knew that this juxtaposition of comedy, unseriousness, and really raw emotional vignettes was the best thing about his work at the time. One of my favorite traditions of his really came to be during Wolf, where at the end of his music videos, he would just cold cut mid-measure into a totally different music video for a song with a totally different vibe. Look at this.
This is kind of disgusting. Fat time and before I flatline, Clancy chimes in my room and catch me. This shit's so damn embarrassing. Like.
This is just the best marketing. Coming from somebody who wasn't listening to Wolf back when it initially came out, this just made me so curious about what the hell this album even was when I first saw it. More to the point though, it just emphasizes how broad of a net this album casts, how complete of a picture you're going to get of who Tyler is when you drop yourself into this world and listen to the album. Wolf is also significant for being the first album of Tyler's to really have a concrete narrative. Wolf is a story about this feud at a summer camp, Camp Flognaw, between a character named Wolf and a character named Sam, all centered around Wolf coming in and taking over Sam's life, replacing Sam as a member of the friend group, a little goon squad called the Dead Sams. Wolf steals Sam's girlfriends later before Sam eventually gets himself killed in a fight. The fact that the album is sung from both characters' perspectives is a really raw example of that juxtaposition that I appreciate so much about Tyler's music. There's always this sharp dissonance between the individual songs where whenever an album drops, you can't really tell if Tyler's doing okay or if he's really going through it. At the end of this album, I'd say we get an answer to that question, a full summary of Tyler's headspace. This is where Tyler learned how to give his album such great endings, using the final song to recontextualize the narrative of the album and tie the story up in a way that makes the album feel complete in a way that his first two albums didn't. In this case, the whole thing ends with the song Alone, where Wolf is talking to the therapist at Camp Flognaw about how he wants to give up on music because all the pressure from the fans and the pressure to always improve himself in a genre that he isn't fully committed to has stressed him out to the point where he was emotionally numb during his grandmother's death. This is also something that I kind of relate to, in my own way. If you're somebody like Drake, then the death of a family member shouldn't really have much of an impact on your artistic career, but for the rest of us, everything tends to get jumbled together. Especially if you're like Tyler and all of your work is so personal. Suddenly, all those fans wearing the Odd Future socks and playing your songs at the skate parks just become a reminder of how things were when your life was simpler. Similarly, it's incredibly hard for me to think about my channel right now, amidst all the stuff that's been going on with me. Just thinking about all the things that I've shared with you guys over the years and how much of that stuff is relevant to my current situation, it makes me feel like I should just go to making bland, shitty game reviews or Drake songs or something, so I can have a little bit less of an emotional investment in my own life. It's not like I don't appreciate all you guys and all the love that you give me, but sometimes when the mood's right, it just makes me feel that much more lonely and isolated. Sometimes it's just a reminder of all the things that I've lost, or that I never had to begin with. Wolf had everything he could want. His rival, Sam, was dead. He had a huge friend group. He got the girl of his dreams, but he just wasn't satisfied. He still wanted to give it up. Similarly, Tyler also had everything. He was one of the most successful up-and-coming musicians in the world at the time. Every kid in every skate park across America at the time was wearing OF socks and listening to Yonkers, and he did it all without ever having to sign up with a label. He did it all without ever having to compromise his vision or change his creative intentions to fit someone else's requirements. But Tyler wasn't satisfied. He didn't want to be known as nothing but a quirky rapper with a knack for marketing. He wanted to be a creator, someone who would change the genre forever, just like MF Doom, one of his biggest inspirations, managed to. Wolf was the end of an era. The next album proves to me that Tyler wanted his music to change. He didn't want to be pigeonholed into just being an edgy rap artist, end of story. I think Tyler wanted to change his style up so much that he didn't know if Wolf would be his last album to find success or not, so as a goodbye to this era of Tyler's music, I think Wolf was intended to be the logical conclusion to everything that was so great about his first two albums. He wanted to show us all that he had mastered what he was initially doing so that nobody could say shit when he switched it up and started doing something else. As far as I'm concerned, he proved it. Nobody could have ever made this album better than Tyler did. Wolf is, for all its quirks, basically perfect as far as I'm concerned. His next album, Cherry Bomb, while being my favorite album of all time, is a lot less perfect than Wolf is. This is when things start to get interesting. This is when the songs start to feel more and more relevant to the nightmares that I've been having, both when I'm asleep and when I'm trying to push through the day. More than that, though, Cherry Bomb is the album where we can start to lay down the foundation of who I am, so that all the albums that he made afterwards can tear that person down. Hey, baby, I'm so fucking sorry to wake you up. I'm at Salem Park, and I've got a lock that needs picking. I'm so fucking sorry. Do you think you can come over here? Thank you. More than any other album I've ever listened to, Cherry Bomb understands how it feels to be me. One of the traits I'm happy to say I share with Tyler is ambition. I'm someone who can always see what change I want to make in my life next. I've always got a goal in mind, and a lot of the time, I've got a plan to work towards it. This is a positive trait, no arguing that, but man, the other way that you can look at it is that no matter how good my life is, no matter how many of my goals I've achieved, I'm never satisfied. Something's always missing. Those problems, those imperfections, whether little or big, become my whole world. No matter how good my life is, I'm a compulsive problem solver, and so if there's ever a problem, no matter how slight, it's all that I can think about. My wife and I have this rule that we need to do everything we can to make sure that we never go to bed while there's still something we need to talk about, or while we're in the middle of an argument or whatever. That hasn't really been possible lately, unfortunately. Her and I are doing fine, but lately there's just so much shit that we need to talk about and figure out, and so many perfectly fine days have ended with me keeping her awake in bed for an extra hour and a half, making sure that we're on the same page about some small, irrelevant issue in our lives. Ambition is the reason that I've achieved everything that I have this early in my life, but it's also the reason that I can hardly ever appreciate any of it. Jesus. Cherry Bomb, Tyler's fourth album, is a love letter and a promise to music, and it's a treatise on the Sisyphusian struggle of the ambitious. We'll get into the ambition side of things shortly, but let's start with the love letter and promise to music part. Like I said, Wolf was the end of an era for Tyler, and if the last song, Alone, is anything to go by, he was starting to get pretty tired of doing his original shtick. Cherry Bomb can be seen as the awkward transitional album between old and new Tyler. Both of his eras have been so distinct that I guess everybody forgets that Cherry Bomb is out there blurring the lines between the two. Cherry Bomb is all about wanting something that you aren't allowed to have. In Tyler's case, that thing he wanted seems like it was just to be an R&B pop artist instead of an edgy rapper. Like I said, I don't really have any place to talk about racial issues, but I'd say this feeling like Tyler was betraying how everybody saw him at the time is probably the motivation behind the Buffalo music video, with whiteface, blackface Tyler getting lynched. Let's get into the music now, though. It's intense. Audibly, Cherry Bomb is a higher contrast album than pretty much anything else I've ever heard. It starts out so angry and high energy that it's just genuinely difficult to listen to. Just blaring, distorted guitars, bass so heavy that it'll peak anything but the absolute best sound systems a broke audiophile like myself can afford. It's not even that it's mixed badly, it actually sounds incredible on equipment that can handle it, but the music itself is just so pissed off and frustrated that your Apple headphones or your car speakers just can't really parse it. The mids get absolutely crushed with every bass note, and it becomes so incredibly hard to even understand what Tyler's saying. Again, unless you're listening on relatively serious audio equipment. When I'm so mad that I feel like I could scream at somebody, what I do is I go on a drive, crank this album up to 10, let it get all distorted and fucked up sounding, and just scream these lyrics in the car. If I'm not mad, the first few songs on this album just give me a headache, but in those rare instances where I'm as mad as I'm just capable of getting, this is exactly how my feelings sound. I don't get that mad very often, but when I do, it's almost always because of one of those nagging imperfections my problem-solving mind likes to hyperfixate on. Then I get mad at myself for not just being able to appreciate all the good in my life. If you listen on speakers that are actually good enough to understand the lyrics here, you'll realize that Tyler's rapping about that exact same shit. I'm famous, everybody loves the music I put out, but I don't. I think Yonkers is ass, but everybody keeps sucking my dick over it. I worked so hard to get where I am, and now all I want is to be somewhere else. I've got this desperate need to do something different that all my fans are going to absolutely hate, and I feel like I'm gonna fucking explode if I don't do it. This is exactly, to a T, how I feel every time somebody talks to me about my old Half-Life videos, or really anything from that first era of the channel, knowing full well that they don't appreciate what I'm going for these days. I worked my ass off to make those videos. I cared about them so much when I made them, but now they're just nothing but a reminder of the fans that I'm letting down when my artistic goals as a creator change. If you want to talk about imperfections in my life that make it hard for me to appreciate the things I worked towards and achieved a couple years ago, that's a big one. So I throw on Cherry Bomb and I wake the neighbors up, blasting it in my car as I just peel out of the driveway. Then, the next thing I know, after I've worked through a bit of that anger, my brain turns back on and I realize that I'm listening to this. This absolutely beautiful music, this music I could sleep to or cry to or find the motivation to change my life to. This album starts out so incredibly difficult to listen to in any other headspace besides as angry as you can possibly get. And then it turns into just the most beautiful music in the world. Listen to it and you'll see what I mean. You won't even realize that you're listening to something beautiful at first, but the second it hits, you're just on this completely transcendent ride up until the very end of the album. To be honest, that gradual transformation does a lot to calm me down when I am in one of those horrible moods. So that's what it sounds like, but what's it really saying? Well, this is where the whole love letter to music thing comes in. If you ask me, that angry, difficult stuff towards the beginning of the album represents how Tyler feels about his old music and the reputation he's earned with it. It's edgy, it's dark, it's noisy. It's like everything Tyler was doing on songs like Radicals or Trash Wing, pushed to the point where it doesn't even sound like Tyler anymore. And it leaves you just missing something. Don't get me wrong, these songs still slap in their own way, but that thing that they're missing is the nuance. The nuance that makes his older music transcend past the likes of early, edgy Eminem. It's like Bastard or Goblin or Wolf if you sucked out all the sentimentality, all the heart, all the happiness that was hiding behind the edgy talk of school shootings and kidnap. It's about halfway through song 3, Pilot, when he's talking about how badly he wants to hijack a plane and go do 9/11, when suddenly that anger turns into yearning, with the beautiful voice of Sydney Bennett harmonizing with him as he just says, "I don't want to crash anymore. I just want to find my wings." Then he goes on to deliver a verse all about how he just wants to find somewhere where he can be himself without any expectations placed onto him, and how he can buy anything in the world, but you just can't buy that kind of peace. If you want to fly away to a magical place where you can do what you like, you can't buy your wings. You have to just find them for yourself. It's the first time that this album softens up a little bit and stops sounding so angry. Then that just gets immediately cut off with the most hectic, angry track on the whole album, Run, in which this pissed off voice just tells him that he's trash and that last song was preachy and weak and that nobody wants to hear that shit. Moving forward, there's this push and pull between the soft, yearning, flying side of this album and the angry, grounded side telling him to get his head out of the clouds and just go make Yonkers 15 more times and call it a day. One particularly interesting song on this album is Fucking Young/Perfect. This is a tricky one to talk about. It's supposedly a true story about a time that Tyler got a crush on a minor. If the song's lyrics are to be believed, then things never got any more serious than a dance and a couple FaceTimes, which, for the record, is way more than should ever happen between an adult and a minor. But like I said, I'm not here to talk about real life. For the purposes of this album, this is, like most of the others, a song about wanting something so badly even though you know that you can't have it. It's uncomfortable to listen to in a way that everything else Tyler's made before just isn't, because it's in the context of his most heartfelt, vulnerable, and emotional album yet. That said, that discomfort is part of the experience of the album, so I guess it is what it is. Personally, I'm of the belief that the reason this song is here is to draw that parallel. The girl from the song, and by extension all the women he addresses at different points in Cherry Bomb, represent his musical goals and creative ambitions. He's in love with something he can't have. And in the context of this metaphor, that thing he can't have is a career where he's known as a composer and as a musical genius, instead of just a quirky rapper with some well-composed beats. I also just have to say, the second half of this song, Perfect, is one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. Caliuchis fits so perfectly into Tyler's world, as do all the other singers on this album. Tyler's singing hasn't really reached its full potential yet. He gets better at singing as his discography progresses, but in the meantime, it just kind of adds to that punkish vibe that his early music always had. It's just an acquired taste, really. Moving on, though, I said that Perfect was one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. Well, the final song, Okaka, California, is the actual most beautiful thing I've ever heard. With Okaka, California, Tyler hits the trifecta. My favorite song of all time is in my favorite album of all time from my favorite artist of all time. Okaka is about that magical place that Tyler wants to fly to. This is the promise part of this album's love letter to music. As far as I'm concerned, this is Tyler promising to his music that he's going to get to Okaka and leave all of this edgy shit in the past. He's scared, but he has to do it. Here's a snippet of him talking to that music. Okaka, California, for me, is about those rare moments in my life where it feels like all of that yearning finally paid off. I finally achieved my goal. I got what I wanted. I'm finally satisfied. I might not feel that way forever, but right now everything is perfect, and I know in my heart that I earned it. Everybody talks about Igor's musical loop, how the album ends on an unresolved note, which is then resolved by the first note of the album, implying that the story is cyclical. Well, Cherry Bomb does that too, in a little bit more of a subtle way, with some unresolved feeling drums that lead perfectly into the beginning of the album. Take a listen. Even with that cool little detail, I do my best to never let this album loop, because it's just too depressing for me every time I hear that transition. Ambition is a cyclical thing. For all the times that you work your ass off and finally make it to Okaka, eventually you're going to just be as pissed off at the next problem as you were at the last. I may finally achieve what I've always wanted and have the life that I've always wanted, but I'm a human, and an ambitious one at that. And sooner or later I'm gonna find a new problem, and suddenly my life doesn't feel as complete as it used to. The worst part is that when that happens, it really does feel like this transition. Just going from the most beautiful song of all time directly back into that difficult to listen to anger that started out the album. I know I'm moving forward, but whenever that happens, it just feels like I'm losing all of that progress. I'm right in the middle of that right now. A few months ago, I was talking about motherhood and love. Shit, I even got married recently, but as of lately, on the chart, I'm directly at the beginning of this album, in Death Camp, and I'm as mad as I've ever been this month. Yet again, it feels like everything I've ever worked for is either falling apart or like it was never even enough in the first place. I'm sitting here thinking about what I could have done to stop this from happening, and just stuck with the knowledge that nothing I could ever do would have been enough to cut out the metaphorical cancer that's in my life right now, or stop it from spreading so far in the first place. That cyclical feeling to it all, like everything I'm ever gonna fight for in my life someday just won't be enough, and each fight will just be replaced with a new fight, a new fear, a new thing that it feels like I'll never have, over and over and over again until I'm dead. It hurts. The looping transition from Okaka to Death Camp is maybe the most cynical thing I've ever heard an album do, and the worst part is that it's so incredibly accurate how it feels to be ambitious. Every time I finish making a video, I usually hate it by the time a week's gone by, and the non-donating viewers get to see it. Yearning is the human condition. I want to change that for the world. I just wish that it didn't have to come with so much anger and sadness every time. Thank you. Alright, Flower Boy. This is kind of a tricky one for me to talk about. I haven't worked on this script for like 5 days because I've just been listening to this album over and over and over again on repeat. I'm not trying to figure out what it's about or anything, but trying to find that personal connection with it. See, I could focus on the queer angle. It's the album that Tyler used to come out of the closet, and that's the most obvious connection I'd have to it, right? I was still in the closet to a lot of people when the album came out. And as someone who had only recently gotten into rap music at that time, this hyper-masculine genre, honestly, Flower Boy made me feel like a little bit less of a poser for caring so much about this genre when so many of its artists would just hate me on principle alone. The thing is, though, this album isn't just about being gay. It's not about hiding your queerness from the world. That might be what the song Garden Shed is about, but that's 4 minutes out of a 47-minute long album. No, to me, Flower Boy is like an album all about self-discovery. Realizing you're gay, coming out of the closet, all that stuff can be part of self-discovery for some people, but there's so much more to it. Time for a little story about self-discovery. I didn't discover myself when I was hanging out with my friends. There wasn't any self-discovery back on the hikes or the drives or the camping trips. I didn't learn anything about myself in the hot box or during sex or after my first kiss. The only time I ever self-discovered were the loneliest, most painful times of my life. I realized I liked dudes after a super close family friend died, and I plunged into this alcoholism that drifted me apart from my high school girlfriend. After a year or two of drinking and getting bent over at parties, I fell into this friend group of other teenage alcoholics, and by the time we were about to hit our 20s, every single one of them, each pursuing life goals in a way that was totally foreign to me, just slowly drifted out of the friend group until eventually it was just me again, all alone and as depressed and addicted as I'd ever been. That depression and that loneliness led to a bit more self-discovery. I gave up drugs and drinking, and then I just had literally nothing. Not even vodka was there to keep me warm at night. Even more loneliness, for me, meant even more self-discovery. I started this channel, and for the first time in my life, I was passionate about something that was actually good for me. Accordingly, all was good for a bit, until I blew up. And suddenly, over the course of about a week, I went from sharing my thoughts on some niche topics with like 300 people to having a platform that was more than a dozen times bigger than the population of the town I've spent my entire life in. Suddenly, there were a couple 100,000 people out there who would love to be my friend, and yet somehow I didn't have a single friend, or at least not in real life. It was just me and my childhood bedroom and my computer and a pile of money like nothing I'd made before or since. The money was so good, in fact, that I was able to move out and get my first apartment. A few months after COVID started and we were quarantined, I finally moved out of my parents' house. I was making enough that I was able to cover the rent entirely on my own, with plenty of wiggle room too, so I was successful at everything, except getting back that social life that I missed more than anything else I'd ever had. And so I sat alone in my fancy apartment and plunged even further into my loneliness. Fuck, man, all I wanted was to get back to the days of my childhood and my teenage years when I was just chilling in this park with my homies every afternoon. I wasn't living on my own for like 2 months before I realized, oh shit, when I'm not living with two people who have been calling me this one name for 22 years, I actually stopped feeling like that's a good name for me after all. So, at the loneliest point in my entire life, I ditched my old name and my old gender and became Penelope. All that loneliness, all that emptiness, It turned my life into a blank slate, basically. You know, the perfect arena for self-discovery. I had my channel, but that was basically the only thing that I decided to keep about myself post-transition. At my loneliest point, I figured out what clothes I like to wear, what types of people I like to date, how my voice sounds, how I feel about my parents, what my kinks are, who I can and can't be friends with, what my channel was going to be all about moving forward. Just so many things. It didn't take long before I was dating again, after like a year of being single and 4 years since I'd had a single relationship that didn't last for like a month before I gave up on it and broke up with the other person. Go watch my video Honesty if you want the most recent example of loneliness and emptiness leading to self-discovery like that. Out of all of that loneliness, that shit life I had acting as a fertilizer, a flower grew. Enter Flower Boy. One of my favorite things about Tyler is how he's always talking about his friends. His old syndicate, Odd Future, had songs where people who didn't even rap came on just to do a verse just because they were his friends. Loiter Squad, Odd Future's old Adult Swim show, was all about Tyler and his friends just hanging out and having fun. Especially in those old Odd Future days, Tyler was completely inseparable from this friend group. The thing is, after Cherry Bomb came out, Odd Future, that massive friend group, was basically dead. I don't know if it had anything to do with all that talk of wanting to burn everything down and start over in Cherry Bomb, but thematically it sure makes sense to me if Odd Future breaking up was a result of all that Cherry Bomb stuff. Listening to Flower Boy over and over again these last few days, I think you can really feel that same feeling I was talking about a minute ago. You really feel that emptiness, that loneliness, that boredom, and you feel that self-reflection and the self-discovery that comes from it. To me, that's what Flower Boy's all about. It's about being that flower that grows out of a pile of shit life. Nowhere in this album is that concept captured more clearly than the 12th track, November. It starts out as this contemplative, doubtful song talking about the fears Tyler's living with.
What if Clinton fucking me over? What if who that boy is rhetorical when this shit is over? What if I'm hustling backwards? What if my accountant ain't paying my taxes, filling his pockets, and IRS show up asking me questions I couldn't answer because I was too busy trying to make classics? What if my music too weird for the masses?
Then we go into this little interlude section where all these voices talk about the best times in their life, their Novembers. The music does this little twist where suddenly the sentimental, nostalgic vibe to the sounds turns into this dissonant, distressful beat, and Tyler sings about how badly he wishes he could go back to November, before we ultimately end on him rapping to a hypothetical love interest on the phone, talking about all the creative inspiration he's felt as these feelings welled up inside of him, as he was stuck in this lonely life, regretting ever letting the past out. Like I said, I think this is the clearest example of this idea I'm talking about here, where the lowest points in someone's life lead to the greatest self-discoveries and the greatest change. One of the cool things about working on these videos for me is that sometimes in the process of creating, I discover that my emotional connection to some piece of art goes deeper than I realized. Ironically, Flower Boy was always the Tyler album that I had the loosest emotional connection to. Every other album of his, I've always been able to tie very directly to a particular point in my life, but I always had trouble feeling like this album was about me in the same way that his other albums had been. Well, after writing all this down, after spending these last few days listening to Flower Boy over and over again, I think I have an album that's about the year that I sobered up and started this channel, and all the loneliness that led me to those decisions. When I committed to making this video, I got these shoes. The original LaFleur 1 stars that Tyler created to coincide with the release of this album. I really like the shoes and I really like Tyler, and I wanted something cool to wear for this video, but the irony wasn't lost on me that these shoes were made to pair with my least favorite album of his. Now though, after writing all this down, I think they've taken on a new meaning for me. These shoes, for me, now represent one of my favorite things about myself. These shoes are a symbol of how I'm able to take a pile of shit and make a flower grow out of it. I guess I already hinted at this a bit after I was talking about Cherry Bomb, but right now in my life, I'm staring at another great big pile of shit. And all I can really do at a time like this is introspect and hope that I can turn it into something beautiful. It's kind of what I tried to do with all my negative feelings in these videos. I just gotta hope that I can do what the musical outro on Flower Boy suggests and enjoy right now today. I guess making this video is my first step towards that. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this pile of shit I'm staring at than I was originally intending to. Frankly, I'm afraid of the consequences that might come up if I do talk about it. And I'm afraid of the... I'm afraid. But I don't think this video is going to feel complete if I don't talk about this. But to do that, we're going to have to move on to the next album. So, I'll see you in a minute. I got a bit of an ego on me. If I make a bad judgment call or do something wrong, I'll own up to it, but when it comes to subjective things, matters of opinion, I'm the most stubborn bitch on the planet. If someone corrects me on something that I did wrong, you know, it's whatever, but if somebody whose opinion I care about says that they disagree with me on something, I will sit there and debate them for hours and hours and hours. To be honest, I'm just not a humble person. I've got my self-esteem issues like everyone else, but I tend to trust my own judgment on just about everything, whether I have any experience or expertise on the subject or not. In and of itself, that's totally fine. It's a good thing, even. It means I'm self-sufficient and I'm not afraid to just put myself in unfamiliar situations and learn as I go. Shit, it's the whole reason I can do this job, to be honest. As long as I'm not an asshole saying to people things like, oh, you're wrong to feel that way, it's fine, right? As long as I'm not talking over the people in my life or ignoring their thoughts and concerns, I'm still a good person, even if I have a big ego. Well, it gets a little bit more complicated when you start considering my own mental health. Back in those lonely days I was talking about in the last chapter, I'd always be coming back to the phrase, I'm my own best friend. Sounds like a positive mental health thing, right? Well, the issue is that if I'm my own best friend, nobody else can be my best friend. I use that phrase to cope with my isolation, but now, years later, now that I have a healthier social life, all that logic does is just isolate me more. Very, very often, I feel like people are misunderstanding me because they disagree with me. I catch myself thinking shit like, God, if only I could just explain my perspective better, you'd realize that I'm right about this thing. I know that shit is incredibly toxic, so I keep it to myself, but it's something that's happening in my own head with just about everybody in my life at one point or another. Maybe I'm a narcissist, I don't know. Because I've got this voice in my head constantly assuring me that I'm right, but I know that it's toxic to always assume that I'm right, I've got to just sit there and be stoic about it the whole time. And stoicism fucking hurts. Enter Igor. Igor, Tyler's 6th album, is a story about this bi-curious man cheating on his girlfriend with Tyler, realizing that he'd rather stay committed to his girlfriend and just being tormented by Tyler's insistence that the guy must be in love with him and not his girlfriend, and that him choosing to go back to her is just him being ashamed of being gay. But that's not really the story as it's told. The whole thing is told from Tyler's perspective, which is just, I helped this guy realize he's gay, and now he's just repressing it and running away from me, even though I know I love him and he loves me. It's an incredibly human story. Back in high school, I put the guy who gave me my first gay experience through basically the same thing, ultimately choosing to end the break that I was on with my girlfriend and leave this guy who helped me discover some pretty important things about myself with all of his unrequited feelings for me. Oh, and so people don't think I'm contradicting myself from the previous chapter, I'll clarify now that the relationship with my girlfriend didn't last much longer than that. They rarely do when a couple decides to go on break, but I digress. It's a bit weird to talk about an album like Igor. See, I have literally no idea if this album is based on a true story that Tyler went through, or put somebody through to be more accurate. And the same is true for the next album, Call Me If You Get Lost. In both cases, if these are real things that happened to Tyler, I'm essentially going to be out here analyzing and giving my perspective on some super personal, heartbreaking things that happened to another human being, a complete stranger. I don't really like that idea, at all, but the simple fact is that anybody who's paying attention to these albums is already doing that in their own head. Based on what all is said in the next album, Call Me If You Get Lost, I'm inclined to believe that Igor is a fictional story, all about the darkest thoughts that Tyler was having during a different romantic situation, but whatever, let's just get on with it. Igor is ultimately 32 minutes of Tyler begging this guy that he hooked up with to realize that he's lying to himself and that Tyler's right about the two of them belonging together, followed by 8 minutes of apologizing and realizing that their friendship is never going to be the same after he showed how possessive and manipulative he can be when it comes to love. Tyler, in this album, is, like me, so sure that if he could just find the right words to say, this guy would realize that he actually agrees with Tyler and that he actually doesn't love his girlfriend and that he's gay. Listen to this.
Take your mask off, I need out the picture. Take your mask off, stop lying for these niggas. Stop lying to yourself, I know the real you. Halloween ain't for a minute, lose the costume.
If you want to break down the structure of the album a bit, which I think we should, Igor's theme, the first song, would be their hookup. This song's sparse lyrics are, to me, a double entendre. We've got two ways of looking at it. First off, lines like, he's coming, riding around town, they gon' feel this one, and got my eyes open, sound like, oh, Tyler's back and he's about to drop an album that people are really gonna emotionally connect with, because he's realized some things that he thinks are profound. Alternately, we can read this as Tyler's interpretation of the sex. Maybe he's coming literally means he's coming, and riding around town they gonna feel this one and got my eyes open refers to Tyler feeling like, wow, that sex was amazing, this guy must have felt it too, and now has his eyes open too, realizing that he's gay. Moving forward to Earthquake, this one is pretty blatantly just Tyler talking with this guy after the sex, saying, that was incredible, I think I love you and I know you love me too, so are you gonna break up with your girlfriend and stay with me or not? We get the guy's perspective on it all, with him just saying that he's got super strong feelings about Tyler and he's feeling really conflicted about the feelings he has for his girlfriend. For some context, Woah Vicky is this famous white Instagram model who caught a pretty huge controversy after using the N-word, but I think it's safe to say that this is an unreliable narrator situation where what we hear here isn't the guy's actual thoughts, rather what Tyler is projecting onto him after that magical sex. Anyways, moving forward in the song, we get Tyler's perspective where he really just wants an answer from this guy on whether or not they're going to stay together after the hookup. Play it. From here on, we can take a step back and not analyze every individual song quite so closely. We get Tyler now starting to lose his connection with this guy, realizing that he really is just straight up in love. Then he realizes that if he and this guy drift any further apart, he'll run out of time to make him leave his girlfriend, so he makes his ultimatum. Leave his girlfriend or lose Tyler. Okay, last one for a sec.
Take your mask off, I need out the picture.
Next up, we go into the angriest and best song on the album, New Magic Wand, which is all about how jealous he is. Hence that line about, my eyes are green, I eat my veggies. He's green with envy. Anyways, it's a song about how badly he wants to just make this girl disappear, even going into violent threats about how he's willing to kill her to make it happen. Funnily enough, a lot of old Tyler songs from back in the day are edgy shit about how he wants to kidnap various girls he's in love with so that he can force them to love him back. Back then it felt like edgy, dark vibes. If you want to attach a horrible, horrible phrase to it, call it school shooter core aesthetics. All of that edgy talk about kidnapping girls and killing their new boyfriends just felt like it was part of the aesthetics of the album, more than something that you should really take seriously. Likewise, here in New Magic Wand, I don't think we're really meant to interpret this as, oh wow, Tyler needs to be locked up because he's literally planning a murder. Instead, I read it as something scarily relatable. You can't just kill people, and Tyler knows that. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. He just wishes that this girl would disappear because even thinking about the two of them together hurts so much for him. I've been there. Granted, I'm fortunate enough to have not been there since high school, but you bet your ass I've had people in my life that I wish would just stop existing because I had such passionate feelings for the person that they were dating. Shit, one time I found out that somebody I knew secretly wished that the girl who is now my wife would have killed herself so that she could be with me. That sure as hell is not a healthy way to be thinking, but man, humans can absolutely be pushed there by jealousy, and as comfortable as it is to think about, Tyler's willingness to talk about and really examine intrusive thoughts like this is part of why I love him, and why I consider him to be the most honest artist out there. Anyways, as the album progresses, we go back and forth between "you're dangerous, stay the fuck away from me, I'm gonna tell your girlfriend that you cheated on her," and "sorry I got mad, can we please talk about it," until eventually we end up at the acceptance song, "Thank You," in which Tyler acknowledges that he's never gonna get to be with this guy and wishes that he could just stop falling in love altogether. Ultimately, we end on "Are We Still Friends?", where Tyler's apologized for being so possessive and manipulative and for trying to convince this guy that he knows what's in his heart better than he does, and just asks if they're still friends. To which, as anybody who's been in a similar situation will know, the answer is probably no. Then, like Cherry Bomb, we get another musical loop. You can't really play it smoothly on a record player since you'd have to flip the record, but just pull out your phone and put the album on repeat and play it for them. See, the last note of the album isn't the root note of the song, so the album ends on an unresolved harmony. Then the first note of the album, that droning noise that we started on, resolves the melody, implying again, like Cherry Bomb, that this album's story is cyclical. Not only is Tyler unable to completely bury his feelings for this guy, but if you want to look at it in a little bit more meta of a way, now he's going to be caught up trying to convince this guy that he's wrong for feeling like they can't be friends anymore. The first time you listen to the album, it's about Tyler thinking that the only reason that this guy didn't choose him over his girlfriend is because he's lying to himself, and how Tyler thinks that he knows this guy better than he does. Once the album repeats, albeit in a less direct way, it kind of becomes an album about how Tyler thinks that the only reason that this guy won't accept his apology is because he's lying to himself, and how Tyler knows better than he does what he feels. The same thing, but with a different context. Throughout the entire album, Tyler says over and over and over again that this guy is in total control of him. That's why the album is called Igor. Igor was a name used for an archetypical character in a lot of old horror movies, a hunchback assistant to the evil antagonist. So the guy is basically Dracula, and Tyler's just the thoughtless assistant that helps in his evil plans, with no agency of his own. The irony, then, is that he spends the entire album trying to manipulate and control this guy's emotions. Emotionally manipulative people kind of love to act like they're the ones being manipulated. Throughout the entire album, Tyler's talking about how badly he was hurt, when that could not possibly compare to the hurt feelings that this guy's girlfriend would feel if she knew about this whole situation. It'd be really easy to condemn Tyler for all of this if the album's a true story. Yeah, he's in love, yeah, his heart was broken, but he's kind of the scumbag of this story throughout the entire album. Maybe even more than the guy who cheated on his girlfriend with him. That's why when I initially introduced the story of this album, I told it from the guy's perspective before switching to Tyler's. Really though, I can't condemn Tyler for all of this any more than I can condemn myself for the things that I've done at my lowest points, like with those girls that I'd simped for back in early high school. I would argue that if these are in fact true events, Tyler couldn't possibly have made such a beautiful and self-reflective and self-critical album like this unless he realized that he was one of the bad guys in the story. For a little advice though, if you find yourself in a situation like this, so convinced that you would be a perfect partner for someone who isn't interested in you like that, just know that it's okay and we've all been there, but maybe ask yourself why you want to be with somebody who doesn't want to be with you. I'm of the ever-controversial opinion that it's impossible to truly fall in love with somebody who doesn't love you back. You might think that you're in love with them, you might be convinced that you could fall in love with them, maybe you just love the idea of them that you've created in your head, but love kinda has to be fostered mutually. You'll never really be able to know if someone is a good match for you until they're sharing in that same vulnerability that you're willing to share with them. I know that this kind of makes true love sound like a paradoxical situation, but it can happen when two people's energies just match. If your love isn't being reciprocated, take a step back and ask yourself what exactly it is you're expecting to change if you two wind up together. If the answer is just more sex and more romantic bonding, you can get that stuff from just about anybody, not just the person that you're after. Back to the album. That friendship between Tyler and his love interest had to end. You just cannot be friends with somebody who had feelings that strong for you and who was that willing to emotionally torment you over those feelings. There was this girl a few years back. She was like my best friend. One of those people who I felt like could see and understand sides of me that hardly but anybody else had ever been able to. After a while, though, she started trying to get between my girlfriend and I. I didn't recognize the problem fast enough, and it got worse and worse until eventually my only real option was to just cold cut her out of my life. Just like an Igor. Like I said earlier, I later found out that she was secretly hoping my girlfriend would kill herself so she could be with me. It was a really, really bad situation. Looking back on it, she was seriously trying to get in my head, drawing these insane conclusions about my relationship and the type of person that my girlfriend was, basically trying to gaslight me into not wanting to be with the most perfect person that I've ever met. The woman who's now my wife, hoping that I'd break up with her. I'm not gonna pretend that I was a hapless victim in all of this. You can go watch my video Honesty if you want more of the story, but for my purposes, she was basically doing the Igor thing. Like I said, ultimately, I just had to cut her out of my life. Then, a few months after all of this happened, Tyler released his next album. What the fuck? Well, it turns out that Igor had a pretty strong resemblance to something going on in my life. Call Me If You Get Lost was the first album of Tyler's that I felt had a downright uncanny resemblance. This one tells a very similar story to Igor, but with a few differences. Instead of anger and emotional manipulation, this time when Tyler developed feelings for somebody who already had a partner, he handled it a lot more maturely, with a lot less, I know you'd rather be with me, so quit lying to yourself, and a lot more, I'm sorry we didn't meet each other at the right time. I think we would have been happy together, but I recognize that I need to give you your space. I wish things could have been different between us, but just know that I'm always going to care about you. Well, that, and a lot more coping. Something that Tyler's been doing ever since Around Wolf came out is a thing that I like to call flex coping. Notice how many of these stories revolve around the central premise of I have everything I could ever want except for the one thing I want the most. Whether that one thing is a love interest or solitude or creative fulfillment or friends, there's a lot of I'm depressed as fuck but I just bought my third McLaren in Tyler's music. Usually this is paired with a little bit of self-awareness, but Call Me If You Get Lost seems to be Tyler's first album that's a full-blown examination of this flex coping habit of his. It was a pretty prominent theme in Flower Boy, too, but DJ Drama, the shouting hype man that follows Tyler throughout the whole album, really brings that concept to the forefront. Listen to how DJ Drama is used to almost distract from Tyler's depression.
Nigga, my heart broken. Remember, I was rich, so I bought me some new emotions and a new boat, cause I'd rather cry in the ocean. It's tea, baby. I tried to tell y'all.
As a matter of fact, in the same song, the second track on the album, we even get a pretty direct confirmation that that's DJ Drama's role in Tyler's emotional journey over this album. Listen here how he asks Drama to turn the music up once he starts getting too depressed to keep going.
About to spend millions just to fill voids up. Drama, I need you. Can you turn the noise up? Can you turn the noise up? Can you turn the noise up?
Upon first listening to Call Me If You Get Lost, DJ Drama hyping everything up felt really out of place in such a somber, introspective album about giving up on love, but as usual for Tyler, that juxtaposition, that contrast was kind of the whole point. The album is all about Tyler being in love with this girl who's already in a relationship and having an incredibly hard time ignoring the chemistry that the two of them have. Rather than spending the whole album frustratedly trying to convince her to be with him, as he did in Igor, this album's a lot more internal and revolves around him learning to accept that even though it's so clear to him what a happy life with this girl would look like, he just can't change reality like that. All he can do is take solace in the things that he does have and try to move on. The album has all this hype music that feels like it's just trying to cover up the sadness and feelings of defeat, hence flexcoping. Call Me If You Get Lost spends a lot of its runtime in this place. It's got more of those hype-sounding, high-energy songs that are usually Tyler's biggest hits. More horns, more rapping, more features. It sounds a lot more like a traditional rap album than anything Tyler's made since Wolf in a lot of ways. I once showed this album to a girl who wasn't really familiar with rap music, and she said that it sounded generic and not like the creative, expressive masterpiece I led her to expect with all my talk of Tyler being this visionary creator. Unfortunately, mindless flexing is kind of what most non-rap listeners think that the genre is all about, so when that same flexing is done with the ironic twist of the album being about using your money and status to try and run away from heartbreak,
Dude, just stop being a pussy and talk about...
Okay, look, y'all already understand what I'm trying to go on about. Let's, address the elephant in the room and talk about the girl. I've kind of been talking about her here and there throughout the entire video, and in a lot of ways she's been the plot of this video. Like I said a couple minutes ago, she tried to get between my girlfriend and I until eventually I just had to cut her off and burn the friendship, and then this album came out. After a while, though, her and I became friends again. Eventually, I was convinced that she had grown in the same ways that I had, and I reached out to her. We met up and apologized for everything. Her for being all Machiavellian and trying to gaslight me about my relationship, and me for not being more clear about the fact that I never had feelings like that for her, and for having to cut off such an important friendship and just leave her hurting like that. Let me tell you why I did it, though. Why I mended the friendship after such a messy falling out. Our mutual friends encouraging me to try again with her was part of it, but another part, a frankly huge part, was Call Me If You Get Lost. I had this profound emotional connection to every Tyler album that came out before, feeling like each and every one of them was, in one way or another, basically just written about my life, but Call Me If You Get Lost is the first album that didn't really do that for me when it came out. I didn't relate to this story. There had been people I was head over heels for in the past, but I'd never been in a situation where I thought that those people must have secretly had feelings for me too, but they just couldn't act on them. No, unlike every other Tyler album which I related to so heavily, this album felt like it was written about her. Let's call her Rachel. Rachel, like Tyler on this album, felt this insane romantic chemistry between the two of us that I just couldn't relate to. Looking back on it now, it seems to me like it was so clear, so obvious to her that we belonged together, and so she assumed that I was right there with her and wanted to be with her too. She assumed that me breaking up with my girlfriend and getting with her would make me happier too. I guess it was just one of those things where you lie to yourself because the lie sounds prettier than reality, and then after a bit, confirmation bias kicks in and you start believing your own lies. Knowing what I know now about Rachel, me ever letting her back into my life feels so fucking stupid. But let's get back on track and talk through what I think is the defining pair of songs on this album. I Thought You Wanted to Dance and Wilshire, and how those two songs recontextualized everything that happened between Rachel and I and made me start to look at her with more empathy than I was able to at the time amidst all the anger and betrayal that I felt towards her when I cut her out of my life. I Thought You Wanted to Dance starts out as this really, really sweet love song about how perfect this girl is and how happy Tyler is to spend his time with her, and then halfway through it switches to this grim, defeated vibe talking about how utterly blindsided Tyler is by the fact that she's committed to her relationship and isn't going to break up with her boyfriend to try things out with Tyler. Tyler's just genuinely confused by the fact that they aren't a couple. It's a personally painful song for me to listen to because I just know that must have been exactly how Rachel felt about me. I didn't feel that romantic chemistry at all, but she felt it so strongly that it seemed as fundamental and obvious to her as the sky being blue. That's the really emotional version of the story. A couple tracks later, we get Wilshire, a song that doesn't really sound like anything Tyler's made before. It's just this simple beat that totally gets out of the way of the lyrics and like 8 minutes straight of really slow, monotone, and straight to the point rapping where Tyler just tells the entire story exactly as it happened with all the emotional weight of I Thought You Wanted to Dance just removed, so as to not muddy up the story with any bias or romanticization. See, that's the part that got me here, the lack of romanticization. With Igor, it's pretty easy to listen to that album and come away feeling like all the talk of the love interest knowing in his heart that he'd rather be with Tyler is just Tyler's twisted own perception of the situation, and that the guy actually is just happier with his girlfriend. I was ready to talk about a similar situation with this song right here, but everything that's described in this song, and by extension the rest of the album, doesn't feel like an unreliable narrator situation. It feels like Tyler and this girl actually had that crazy chemistry, but that it was just bad timing because she also had those feelings about her boyfriend. That isn't how it went down with Rachel and I. With us, it really was this insanely strong romantic connection that one of us felt, but that just wasn't there at all for the other. That's the mistake I made when I related this album to her so much. I should have realized that she was being more like Igor, but I assumed that it was this more mature, morally gray situation that's described in Call Me If You Get Lost. I shouldn't have let Rachel back into my life. I know that now. I'm gonna get into why that is in a moment, the recent revelations that made it so clear to me that I never should have trusted her again. But Wilshire does something that I really appreciate, which is a little bit hard not to fixate on as I write this. After Tyler's done rapping at the end of the song, he just talks directly for a moment, talking about how he's so scared to put this song, and by extension this album, out there. How this situation was so hugely foundational to him, but now, to his fans, it's just another story. Every time Tyler goes through something horrible, or does something horrible, and learns some huge life lesson, and decides to share that wisdom with his audience, to a certain group of people in his fan base, all it means is that it's just time to make another page on the OFWGKTA wiki. This human being, through his honesty, turns his own life into a saga for unempathetic fans to gawk at. That same shit happens to me all the time. I'll make a video about, for example, me coming to terms with the relationship that I have with my mother, and most people really appreciate the introspection, but to a select handful of no-lives, it's just fuel for reaction content or arguments in the comments about whether or not I'm a good daughter, like any of them really know anything about my life, besides the little vignettes I find the time and the words to share. They completely miss the point of my honesty and my openness and turn my life's passion into some dumbass meme. Tyler having issues with relinquishing his privacy isn't anything new, and God knows that it's something I relate to a lot, but this little outro at the end of Wilshire really made me reflect on that a lot. Oh, Jesus.
I thought I was bulletproof. She proved me wrong, man. I felt 200% with her.
Over the course of planning and writing this video, one of the biggest points of contention for me has been how much of my story I'm really willing to share and tell here. I've never really had a problem with being open and honest about my life on the channel, especially when it comes to the things I've done wrong in my life. Regular viewers already know enough about me to know that I used to be a massive piece of shit, and not even that long ago in the grand scheme of things. All that stuff is information that I volunteered freely because I thought maybe y'all could learn a lesson from my mistakes, and I could turn all that negativity and all that hurt into some sort of positive impact. Tyler does the same thing, especially on Igor and the next album, Chromakopia. He's got no issue with talking about how he's kind of a bad person in a few specific ways. And I'd like to think that I don't have an issue doing that either. It's a good thing when I do it, and it's a good thing when Tyler does it. the world becomes just a slightly better place in some small, minute way when we're open and honest about our flaws and mistakes and the ways that we're trying to fix them. But man, if you suffer from anxiety as extreme as mine, thinking about all of these people who don't know anything about you, but knowing so many little things about my life, it's really stressful. Seeing people discuss my life like they've got the grounds to say anything about what goes on when the camera's turned off, it's sickening, to be completely honest. That's the only word I have for it. The ironic thing is that I've got no issue talking about it when I made a mistake and I want to share my stories of personal growth, but in a situation like this one, like the one I'm still trying to push myself to talk about today, where I'm the victim, it's so hard to not censor myself. This is like the most frustrated that I've ever been making a video. The shit that Rachel has done to me and my loved ones, and the time that I've known her, the things that I've forgiven her for, the second chances I've given her, the times that I thought she learned her lesson just for her to go and hurt more people that I care about. It's all really raw for me. It's so hard for me to convince myself that I'm allowed to talk about it. To be honest, she's already got a history of lying about me to other people, and just the thought of her seeing this video just makes me so incredibly A while after Call Me If You Get Lost dropped, Tyler released an extended version of the album called The Estate Sale. I didn't really think that it had much to do with the plot of Call Me If You Get Lost, so I decided to be a purist about it and treat them as two separate albums. I still kind of do that, but now I see that The Estate Sale was almost sort of foreshadowing what all Tyler was going to be trying to do with the next album, Chromakopia. Just like Chromakopia, The Estate Sale is all about acceptance, and more specifically, finding happiness, like real happiness, not just cope, amidst all these heartbreaking circumstances that Tyler's always talking about in his albums. Chromakopia really feels like an album that's kind of like the end of Tyler's story. Sort of like how Wolf was the end of the Bastard and Goblin story, Chromakopia feels like the conclusion to everything that's been building up in Cherry Bomb, Flower Boy, Igor, and Call Me If You Get Lost. Shit, in a lot of ways, it actually feels like a new conclusion to Goblin, Bastard, and Wolf, too. I'm sure there'll be more albums after this one, but as of right now, Chromakopia feels like that moment where everything's pulled back and Tyler really introspects about everything that he has been and all these albums and all these stories that he's told through his music over the years. Truth be told, it's what inspired me to finally make this video. I also wanted to do that. I wanted to make that grand video that kind of re-examines and recontextualizes everything that you guys know about me. But that's hard to do. This situation I'm in, at least I hope, is just about over, but weirdly enough, what I'm looking forward to the most is just being able to be sad about something that has nothing to do with her. It feels like, and surprisingly, this is barely even an exaggeration, but it feels like every single problem I've had the couple years that I've known this girl, everything that's made me sad in the last couple years has all been centered around her in one way or another. Every mistake or betrayal or fear or doubt or heartbreak, everything from losing my apartment to my own negative perception of my sexuality to my wife's self-image issues to me fearing for my own safety and the safety of my family. It all ties back to this girl. Not all of this stuff is necessarily her fault, but she's been at the center of just every negative thing in my life in one way or the other. The other day I made my wife and my best friend watch Children of Men with me. It's a goddamn beautiful movie. I can't recommend it enough, about A man who went from being an activist to a totally broken down nihilist, eventually finding his faith again and reconnecting with his radical roots for the sake of a refugee woman and her baby. We were all crying our eyes out by the end. The reason I needed so desperately to watch such a depressing movie at such a depressing point in my life is, again, just because I wanted to be sad about something that had absolutely nothing to do with Rachel. It worked for an hour or two, but afterwards the weight of everything that she's putting us through just came crashing down on us once again. I've got a whole video written about that type of dissociation. The script is actually finished already, but the conclusion that I landed on in the video was that type of dissociation just plain does not work long term. You can't just will your problems out of your mind. All you can do is confront them, and if they're unconfrontable, you have to figure out how to find happiness in spite of them. You need to figure out something that you can look forward to if you want to be able to survive in this depressing-ass world. Well, that's what Chromakopia is all about. Just tearing out the carpets and exorcising the demons at the root. Addressing the problems that are stopping you from achieving happiness. Ultimately, no problem ever goes away unless you take the time to understand it and talk about it. It's the only way that you can really grow past any trauma that you might incur in this world. It's about closure and, more importantly, acceptance. Talking about those insurmountable problems is what Tyler's doing with Chromakopia, and that's what I've been trying to do with this video, and really all my videos. So let's take a quick look back at Tyler's previous albums and see if we can identify what some of these problems are, so that we can then see how the album goes through them one by one and showcases the closure and self-acceptance that they've all been met with, and how Tyler finds the beauty within himself that had been covered up by all of that trauma. So we've got a lot to go through here. Let's start with the most prevalent thing that Tyler talks about over his entire discography: love. For those first few albums, every other song is about a different girl that he says he's completely fallen for: Salem, Slater, She, whatever. Then we've got 2 whole albums, Igor and Call Me If You Get Lost, about 2 different people that he swore he was in love with. Being fickle like that when it comes to love is real shit. It's a problem that I used to have, where I could very easily fall head over heels for anybody who would give me the time of day, and my dating life started to feel more like an assembly line than a journey. There's a lot of fear of commitment that comes with a habit like that, and that's something that's always been prevalent in Tyler's music. Like I said, I've kind of grown out of that problem, or maybe I just found a woman who was perfect enough to stop it from happening, but regardless, it's a problem that I can really, really empathize with. Next up, we've got a related problem: hyperactive libido. Tyler's never really framed this as a problem per se in his previous work, but from the earlier, more sexually frustrated albums to the newer ones, where it's clear that sex is just a major part of how he processes his emotions, it's always been a very prevalent theme. In and of itself, a high libido isn't really a character flaw at all, but ever since somewhere around the time he put out the song Sorry Not Sorry, there's been a lot of talk of overlap with that previous issue, where Tyler's admitted to having a habit of leading people on and ditching them once his sexual or romantic interests lure him in a different direction. Thankfully, I can't fully relate to that part of the problem, at least not since I was a teenager, but a hyperactive libido getting in the way of personal connections is very real, just like the last one. A lot of the time I worry that the people in my life kind of assume the worst of me and think that my intentions with them must just be sexual, just because I'm such a sexual person in a general sense. For instance, I recently told somebody very dear to me to have fun on their way to a hookup, and I spent the next hour just laying in bed worried that they misinterpreted that as me having some sort of personal interest in their sex life, if you catch my drift. The same goes for any time I want to randomly compliment somebody. There's always this fear that everything I do is being perceived as related to sex by the other people. It's a strange label to have attached to yourself, the sexual one, because while again, in and of itself, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a high libido, it definitely makes it easier for people to assume that you've got some sort of ulterior motive. Sexual motivations are probably the number 1 most lied about thing in all of human history, to be honest, if I had to guess. So it tracks. Anyways, on to problem number 3. We've got Tyler's intense passion and his ambitious mindset. It was a big part of the Cherry Bomb discussion, how people like him and me are never really satisfied because we're always just looking for the next mountain to climb, whether creatively or just in our own life goals. Again, I can very much relate to this one. It feels like satisfaction, truly being happy with where you're at in life, is completely impossible for me sometimes. No matter how many of my dreams I accomplish, no matter how many people I have nearby that love me, no matter how the material conditions of my life improve, I'm always just looking for problems, and so sometimes those problems are all I can see. Then with Igor, we've got the narcissism angle, where you feel somewhere deep inside like you're right about everything, and anybody disagreeing with your subjective opinion is just the result of a miscommunication that happened at some point. A toxic trait of mine that I do my absolute best to suppress. Man, saying all this out loud in this video feels like a pretty big self-report, but I guess this whole video feels like a self-report. But whatever, publicly talking about my character flaws is a pretty huge part of what growth looks like for me, and something tells me that Tyler can probably relate to that. Fortunately for me, the final issue of Tyler's that I'm going to touch on here is one that I can't personally relate to in any way, but that is very important for the plot and themes of Chromakopia. Tyler's very first album was called Bastard, and unsurprisingly, his relationship with his absentee father has been a big theme in his music ever since the very beginning. I'm gonna put on the other screen a list of songs where Tyler talks about his dad real quick. Again, I really can't imagine what it'd be like to grow up without a father. The best that I can do here is just to listen to the music and try to empathize. So far, going through the previous work, Tyler's attitude has almost always been anger. Really, the song Answer off of the album Wolf is the only track I can think of off the top of my head that's about how Tyler just wishes he could have known his dad rather than calling him an asshole and just relentlessly hating on him. So, Chromakopia is an album about processing all of these emotions, admitting your flaws and the ways that you were wronged, and why that's such an important thing to do. How that discussion can help you to grow past your trauma and your weaknesses. It shouldn't be any surprise to regular viewers that talking about your problems to help fix them is something that I can really, really get behind. Starting the album out, we get a sort of thesis statement for the concept of the album, with the opening song, Saint Chroma. Tyler whispers this verse that gradually transitions into regular spoken aloud rapping about how he's got this fire inside of him, but he's thinking about whether or not it's time to wrap it all up and retire from making music, denying himself the chance to let that light inside of him shine. Importantly, he ends the first section of the verse saying,
I ain't never had a doubt inside me, and if I ever told you that I did, I'm fucking lying.
And anybody who's listened to Tyler knows that this is complete bullshit. I get being confident. To be honest, there are times that I catch myself gaslighting myself into thinking that all my self-doubt is performative, and I get the feeling that Tyler has intrusive thoughts that look like that too. But that is not how it works. That self-doubt is real. You may know in your heart that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. That's where I'm at, but that doesn't mean that you don't have doubts. No, this line, if I ever told you that I had doubts, I was lying, has to be ironic. Or, not ironic, but more specifically, a deliberate example of the type of dissociation that it takes to thrive in a creative career. Shit, this very album, like all of his others, is kind of all about his doubts. What we end up with here in this introductory song is the tightest yet example of that never-ending struggle between the side of you that knows that you can do incredible things and the side of you that tells you that all your passion is cringy and will never be appreciated. In Tyler's case, that's probably especially tied to his age and how long he's been doing this. I mean, Bastard, his first album came out 16 years ago now. I've only been doing this channel for 6.5 years, and I'm constantly trying to prove to myself that I still haven't peaked yet. I can absolutely understand just wanting to quit while you're ahead and cement your legacy before you fall off. We're all gonna fall off someday, so, you know, you might as well die young and leave a pretty corpse, right? Well, ultimately, that struggle, that duality, is the narrative that this album's centered around. Will the passion beat out the fear, or will Tyler leave the limelight early enough to actually be missed by his fans? Given that his body of music has always been so personal, seemingly the best way to answer that question is to acknowledge the history of baggage and trauma that's made his music so easy to connect with, and see if we still like him once that stuff's out of the picture. Basically, the question that the album is asking at this point is whether or not Tyler is still Tyler without hating his father, or without all those other personal issues that I mentioned earlier that have been prevalent in his music throughout his whole career. You know, is a sad song still relatable in the same way if the creator of the sad song isn't sad anymore? Or, alternatively, maybe Tyler takes that mask off and we find something beautiful hiding underneath. Well, one by one, we systemically break down those individual problems to take off the mask and get to that answer. It's not the exact order of the album, but let's start with the 4th song, Darling Guy. This is a song about that flippin' love thing that I mentioned earlier, where Tyler finds it so hard to fall in love and so hard to commit because he's just always falling head over heels for the next person. Now again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with non-monogamy so long as it's properly communicated and consented to. I know plenty of great people who are polyamorous, but it's kind of a simple fact that if you're in your 30s, being poly probably would make it really hard to settle down and get married. And ultimately, for somebody as passionate as Tyler, I think finding a spouse or two and settling down really is the only way that he can enjoy his life if he weren't creating art anymore. That struggle between stability and creativity has always been a theme in his music. It's something he's been struggling with since Wolf back in 2013 at the very least. In this song, we seemingly finally get his answer, his final look on how he sees his future looking.
But when that gray hair finally come, at least I felt something if I ain't found the one. Nobody could fulfill me like this music shit does, so I'll be lonely with these Grammys when it's all said and done. Come on.
I listened to this album about 30 seconds after it officially released at around 6 a.m. a few months ago. And hear me when I say that this song was kind of an emotional moment for me. Now, am I one to get all emotional about the creative struggles of a complete stranger? No, not usually, but man, for the 6.5 years that I've been doing this channel, I've been listening to Tyler describe the exact same doubts that I've had since the moment I first hit my stride with these videos. I've even made whole-ass videos about how I'm just terrified of the emotional commitment that I've made to this channel, and my creative career as a whole. Frankly, I've been watching one of my biggest creative role models ask himself if he should just give up for like 9 years now, and listening to this song, I finally got to hear him say, no, fuck that, I'm too passionate about this shit to give up on it. It's a little bit embarrassing to admit it, because this is the life of a total stranger that we're talking about here, but yeah, hearing that last bar in this song meant a lot to me. I'm lucky enough to have found a woman to be my creative muse, so I get to have the best of both worlds, but man, that doesn't mean that I haven't spent my whole career thinking about giving it all up and getting a job as a delivery driver. That's the kind of closure that we're talking about with this album. If you've been paying attention, you know that I've had a lot of emotional investment in the various problems that Tyler's bumped up against over his career, and his life as a whole, really. Because I just plain see so much of myself in him. And yeah, maybe that doesn't make me a stan, or like the song Colossus off of Wolf. But I just share a lot of his problems, and one by one, that same kind of closure I was just talking about is applied to so many different problems that I've had a similar level of emotional investment in for almost a decade. We've got him coming to terms with his hyperactive libido in Hey Jane, where he acknowledges that he should stop slut-shaming himself and just be transparent about the fact that sex is a core part of who he is. I can't tell you how much I've shamed myself for my sexuality, and I have an OnlyFans account for fuck's sake, but I still just sex shame myself. I mean, sex is part of my career, and I still just feel like it's this fundamental flaw in my character for some reason. An inherent ontological evil within me. I don't slut-shame other people, but I do it to myself. Sex can be volatile. You have to be very delicate with it, but it's not a bad thing by any means. It happens to be like my second most valuable form of self-expression. I can't go around having this horrible perception of something that's a fundamental part of who I am like that. My wife is the one who taught me that lesson, but man, hearing that lesson reflected in a song from an artist that's been such a huge part of my life, and so many things I've felt over the years, just feels, again, like an extra layer of closure. This album is just loaded with songs like these, where Tyler talks about all these issues and fears he's been talking about for his whole career, and each and every one of them just has this air of self-acceptance, and that's just so incredibly optimistic in a way that Tyler's music has absolutely never been before. All while keeping prevalent those fears and anxieties of becoming washed up and not finding happiness, not finding Okaga in time. It's just such a beautiful journey. It's got the best balance of different sounds that Tyler's created yet, the best pacing, the best theming. Cherry Bomb is still my favorite Tyler album. I think that's always going to be true. But you'd have a pretty tough time convincing me that Chromakopia isn't his best album yet. Eventually, though, getting towards the end of the album, we land on Like Him. This is the song about Tyler's father. This man's first album was called Bastard. Tyler being abandoned by his father really is like the single biggest piece of trauma that's been underpinning his entire career. If you want to go out and say that this thing is the plot of Tyler's entire discography, I don't think anyone would really be able to argue with you for more than a minute or two. So how on earth do we bring closure to something that huge, that unresolved? I mean, the man still hasn't come back as far as any of us know. Well, in a beautiful twist that addresses Tyler's narcissism that was the subject of Igor, the answer is empathy. The song starts with Tyler being told by his mother that he's starting to look exactly like his father, before he goes on to sing about how he's getting old and feels lost in his 30s, fearing his inevitable aging. All this stuff brings to mind a lot of the anxieties that this album has spent a lot of time talking about, specifically around parenthood. You've got Hey Jane, which is all about a pregnancy scare and how this girl who may or may not be pregnant just wants to raise the kid alone so that she doesn't have to commit to being caught up in Tyler's limelight and energy, and because she doesn't want to be with Tyler, knowing that she'd be holding him back from the things that he loves. You've got Darling I, just addressing the fear of romantic commitment in general, and just in a broader sense, this album has that duality to it, where whenever Tyler's talking about adulthood and becoming too tired to keep going, the sound has a generally somber vibe to it, but during any discussion of sex, creativity, gender shit, or music, the energy is so high and optimistic in the sound. This is, if you ask me, all there to draw a parallel between Tyler and his father. Tyler has spent so many songs just passionately shitting on this man for choosing the single life over starting a family, but ultimately, over the course of the album, he's able to acknowledge who he is and what he wants out of life and finds a new way to love himself, all while he decides to choose his career over starting a family. It's not exactly the same. After all, Hey Jane is just about a pregnancy scare, not about literally having a child and choosing to abandon them, but this is the first time we see Tyler saying that he understands how his father must have felt when he made that decision. And furthermore, saying that he might do the same thing if he was in that position. So if he can forgive himself for not being a family person, maybe he can forgive his father for it too. It's just fucking beautiful. I don't even have an absentee father. That's one of those problems that I explicitly can't relate to Tyler on, but God, I bawled my eyes out when I heard this song for the first time. It's just a relationship dynamic, a perception of somebody that's defined the music that has meant so much to me over the years. Then there's another twist. At the end of the song, we hear what I'm led to believe is the voice of Tyler's actual mother, finally admitting to Tyler that she was the one who kicked out his father, and that he wanted to be there for Tyler all along, and she just asks him for forgiveness. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if I could forgive that or not. If that's really is how it went down, if my mother just let me believe that my father abandoned me when in fact it was her that kept me from having a father, I don't know if I could get past it. Then, well, if that is what's been happening to Tyler over his life, and that's not just a misinterpretation on my part, I'd like to think that his mother finally coming clean about this lie and asking for forgiveness is what inspired him to make this album, all about self-acceptance and coming to terms with the things that you wish you could change about yourself. I've had similar moments in life, where one person's honesty inspired another person to be honest, and as somebody whose whole thing is personal growth, that's like kind of the rawest, most powerful kind of personal growth that you can really have, at least in my experience. Ultimately, it's my interpretation that that honesty from his mother is what inspired Tyler, at the end of this album, to accept himself for all his flaws and commit to being the creator that he was just born to be. That honesty is what inspires him to take his mask off and let the fire inside of him out at the end of the album. Ultimately, the biggest juxtaposition of this album is the name. Chromakopia is a reference to this old book called The Phantom Tollbooth, where a character called Chroma the Great is tasked with using color to orchestrate the sunrise and the sunset. The thing that grabs me about this title is how Everything in this album is monochromatic. The cover, the artwork, the music videos, all of it is just pure black and white with a slight green tint. But the album's title itself is a reference to the color spectrum. There are all sorts of ways to interpret this juxtaposition, but here's the one that I landed on. Ultimately, once you acknowledge a problem and accept the things that you can't change about yourself, you turn this caustic, volatile part of your life into a memory. It becomes a photograph of the past, static and unmoving, black and white. This is ultimately an album about Tyler taking all the color, all the emotion out of all these things that have plagued his past, so that he can then use those colors to paint a new picture. Just like Flower Boy, growing a flower out of a pile of shit life. Only this time he's leaving the past behind him and looking solely to his future. He's finally moving on. It's exactly what I aim to do with this video. Call it me being inspired by the album's honesty in the same way that Tyler created this album off the inspiration from his mother's honesty, if that is what happened. But I'm tired of keeping my own mask on when it comes to this issue with Rachel. This girl, someone who I've given so much love and trust and respect to as she's hurt us all time and time again, has finally lost me. I won't even say what all she's done because frankly you wouldn't believe me, and maybe even more frankly I'm a little bit afraid of her. She's an abuser in every sense of the word. Think of the worst thing that somebody can be, the worst thing you can imagine them doing, and there's a pretty good chance it's on the list somewhere. I wish that was an exaggeration, but when you see all of her deeds listed out on paper, it looks like something that we all made up as a joke, like a parody of a flawed human being. In response to all this, she's lied and redirected herself away from personal growth, just repeating those same mistakes and doing the same horrible things that I once forgave her for, to people who are even more vulnerable than I was when I first met her. Ultimately, my family and I have made the incredibly hard decision to just cut her out of our lives. She was like a little sister to me. I thought that we could help her to grow past her violent and dangerous behavior if we just forgave her enough, if we talked to her about all the ways that we've grown since we met her. If we made sure that she was safe and never stopped loving her, surely she would see that trust, like actual trust, can exist between people. Surely we could make her accept that she needed a change. But that was just denial. I was in denial about it. Everybody connected to this situation was in denial about it for years now. It wasn't even my initial decision to get her out of our lives. I had to be convinced through mutual tears by multiple people to finally accept that this isn't what our life was supposed to look like. My wife put it the best. She said that we cut out a hole in our heart for her, and now there's nothing there but empty space. For my part, it feels like I'm losing a limb. I would rather lose a limb. I mean, there's a lot of days where, you know, I wish that I could have just never found out about all the things she's done. I wish that I never caught her in her lies. I wish I could just go back to a few months ago when I was just living and just surrounded by her comfortable version of the truth. However, as her apology for all this stuff has taken the form of her doing everything she can to make our lives harder, you know, as she makes her exit, it's impossible to ignore that she never wanted to change. And she was never truly sorry. People have done some really horrible things to me in my life, like things I can't talk about on YouTube without instantly getting, you know, the video flagged. But for all the love I've given to this person, all the forgiveness and understanding, I've never in my entire life felt more used. This is, turning out to have a lot less to do with Chromakopia than I was expecting it to when I initially came up with the concept for this ending. Chromakopia is an album about never giving up, but I'm using it to tell a story about how I've been forced to give up on something I loved so dearly. This is not finally finding happiness. This is world-shattering loneliness. This is an abandonment of the values of, forgiveness and mutual growth that I've always prided myself on. Frankly, it's hard to feel like this outcome is anything other than me just becoming a worse person. Anyone who watches this channel knows that forgiveness, personal growth, and, trust in people are things I value a lot, and things I fought very hard to get back after I lost them. And it feels like I have had to abandon some of that, Yeah, we gave her lots of second chances, but for me to just look at somebody and say, no, nothing you can do will make this better, it feels like I lost something. Not just Rachel. It feels like I lost a part of myself. Like I said, I'm just a slightly worse person than I was before all of this. I know that that's not true, though. I'm doing what I'm doing to protect the people I love. The needs of the many and all that, but let me tell you what the Chromakopia connection here is. Let me tell you why I'm going to be listening to this album and crying my eyes out thinking about this situation for the next couple years. The situation that I'm in, it might not be one of the ones that Tyler's made an album about, but the acceptance that Chromakopia is all about, that's what I have to look forward to right now. That's what's going to be waiting for me once, I finally start to heal from all of this. Over the coming years, the color will drain from this situation for me, and I'll be able to add those colors back into my palette. And this video, hopefully is just the first step, the first demonstration of some of those colors that I'm going to be bringing back into my world and reclaiming. Even as I write this, as the overcast of winter fades from my town, I can see the blue of the sunrise, the green of the trees, the red of those candles over there, the whole spectrum of bulb lights that I have lining the ceiling of my porch more vividly than I've been able to for a long time. And I mean that as literally as I meant anything I've ever said. It's literally more colorful. I'm gonna go off script for a minute here. When I wrote that last paragraph about everything being more vivid, I was kind of just predicting how I was gonna feel. I was still in the middle of this situation. Rachel was still, fucking with my life, all of our lives. And, I've gotten through depressing phases before, and that whole thing about things looking more colorful afterwards has been true in my experience. But now it's been 4 days since the situation was resolved, quote unquote. And it's blowing my mind, how true that is. I mean, literally, these shoes, my fucking Flower Boy shoes look so orange and so pink. Got some pill bottles over there that look just vivid. I hit the nail on the head on how this whole thing was gonna feel. And that's why, in spite of all of this, I'm able to have a little bit of hope right now. Things are peaceful right now in a way that they haven't been for a while. And yeah, it feels like this great big loss. It feels like ultimately just something I lost, something I didn't win at, but I got something to look forward to. I'm getting those colors back, right? And okay, I should get back to the script. I might not be at the end of this emotional journey that Chromakopia describes, but I am at the beginning of it. The colors that I once used to paint such an ugly picture of abuse and betrayal are fading from the past and being used for a new painting on a canvas, which I'll be using to discover a new meaning for my life. Some things can't be changed. They just can't. In a situation like that, all you can really do is accept it and move on. I could just give up and snuff out the fire, but that's not who I am. I'm not gonna dim my light for anybody, least of all Rachel. As grim and defeated as these last few months have made me feel, as I look out at that sunrise, all I can think about is how excited I am to start the next painting. I hope that you all are going to be there to see it. This is going off the script again. This is a scary video to make, you know. I'm horrified about what this video, what effect it might have, you know. Because I just want this drama to end. I just can't live with this anymore. I need to get past it. And, well, unfortunately, talking about my life on camera is how I get past shit. So, well, if you are watching this with, empathetic eyes, thank you. But if you made it to the end of the video, I guess I just got one last thing to say to you. You know, don't ever dim your light for anybody. And as impossible as it seems, find something to look forward to. Because there's always something out there, something to look forward to, some new painting to be painted. And if you believe in that, you know, like Flower Boy says, you can enjoy right now, today, even if it's still bad at the moment. Okay, the video's over. You don't have to keep on watching. Just gonna do a little life update about a few things, and of course, read out the names of the $10 plus patrons. Okay, I want to be fast about this. Every time I've tried to record it, it has taken way too long. No idea what's going on with my camera, by the way, but I think it's cool, so whatever. Torment Session 2. For those who don't know, I originally had the idea of having a mini-series that I was going to produce over the course of this year, 1 episode a month. I made the one for New Year's Eve, and then I thought about it a bit more and decided not to go any further with it, because while I was trying to evolve the formula of these videos, the format of these videos, I think ultimately all it really did was diminish the personal connection that I tried to have with my videos. I want them to feel like a conversation between you and I, you know, the viewer and me. And I feel like adding an element of fiction, dramatizing it, making it so I'm not directly speaking to an audience, but speaking to a voice recorder was the plot of the show. Diminished that, so cut that out. And then I spent 6 months working on this video. That's not going to be regular. I've got a whole lot of regular-sized productions that I can do, that I've planned while making this. But, well, as you can imagine from the content of this video, I've been going through some things. This has been the worst year of my life, no question, bar none. And this video is how I have dealt with it. I want to say that first off, probably going to do some behind-the-scenes stuff on the second channel, because there's a lot of interesting tidbits, whatever you want to call them, about this video, given that it's so long and such a departure from my normal production value for me. That's probably no surprise. So I don't know, maybe I'll make a community post or something if I decide to go through with that. Secondly, let's just get straight into the Patreon read. This video is long enough already. It's gonna be a little bit of a special one this time because, while this video is not making any money on ad revenue, I haven't even uploaded it yet, and I already know that it's impossible for this to get monetized with all the copyrighted music that's in it. And on top of that, having not uploaded for about 6 months, my YouTube ad revenue has really gone downhill, as anybody would, be able to predict. And I've been carried since the start of this year, and really for a very long time now, multiple years, but especially right now, carried exclusively by the people who are on my Patreon. It means the world that people have that faith in me. For them to be willing to stay here, stay donating to my Patreon for over 6 months without a single upload, is really an honor that I cannot possibly express in any sort of expedient way. Knowing that you guys have that level of faith in me to let me push myself like this and do something so offbeat for myself really means the world to me. I would love to sit here and cry on camera for like 15 minutes about it like I did the first time I tried to record this, but we don't have time for that. And of course, that thank you extends to everybody in my life who has helped to support me while I did this. Because while I do still have income, it was not as anywhere near what it normally is on a normal upload schedule, which again, I will be returning back to just as soon as I finish this video. Honestly, I'm probably going to start writing the next script as soon as I'm done here. And I also just want to say, before I start reading the names, that this video, even if I don't get a single regular viewer to become a patron viewer from this video, it'll be worth it. I don't expect this one to do well. If it gets 10,000 views, I'll be over the moon. But I learned a lot here in this video. I've learned so many new techniques. I've gotten so much better at, I would say, every single facet of my job over the course of this production. And, well, to finally see it's May 30th right now, to see it finally finished is surreal. And I am incredibly excited to see what I do next, to see how I'm able to continue pushing, to see how the lessons I've learned apply to a more traditional video of mine. I mean, dude, I have started doing, like, intense... You can read about what this is on my Blue Sky, but, I have gone on all in on really thinking incredibly seriously about every creative decision I make. I leveled up with this one. That's the best way to put it. And I think the investment of the last 6 months, aside from just getting a video that I'm personally very fulfilled to have made, the investment in my own skills that the last 6 months has been is worth it, even in and of itself. So thank you again to all my patrons for giving me that opportunity, and to the people I live with for giving me that opportunity. I was not exaggerating in that credit scene back there on the couch. This video really was made with the help of every single person who's, like, relevant to my life, who has any sort of significant place in my life right now. I'll get into what that means if I do more behind the scenes stuff, but for now, let's read these patron names. However, one more thing I want to say before I do that. There's a particular member of my community named Casey. I won't say exactly what the whole story is there, but you know who you are, Casey. Wow, I could not have made it through these last few months without you, without your donations. I've talked to you about it a little bit. Times have been extremely tough financially, and there were multiple times where, I mean, I would open up my bank account, see $0, and then later that day you hit me up. You carried me through a whole lot, as did all the other patrons. So sorry, my headphones died, and with them the microphone died. As I was saying, thank you very much, and especially also well mixed up now. Also, thank you to all the patrons who are donating $10 or more monthly. Again, it means so much to me how many of you guys have the faith in me to stick around through that upload drought. And those patrons are BG Siru, Emma Roberts, Kelly, Gas Mask, Violet Bloom, Rose Like the Flower, Max Bean, Cass Carton, Kai Angel, Molly, Daniel McDonald, Axel Echo, Field Number 5, Haypax Legomenon, Haypax Legomenon, Patient Advocate, Swatchbox, Liz the Strange, Stormy, Mintiest Miranda, Pa Aurelia, Chloe R., Thea Westfall, Autumn Hawk, Eon Luster, River Moon, Cecile, Marcy, Neo Lunatics. Cecile's a really pretty name, by the way. Cecile, Marcy, Neo Lunatics, Agatha Sorceress, Huntikar, Catalina Acadre, Vivian Violet, I Eat Teeth, Hazel the Dog, the cooler one, Edelsis, Bridget G, Scott Edwards, Alex, Issa, One-Eyed Wiley, Maddie Tourmaline, Metamaniac, All Hail Eris, Ave Lunum, The Narcissist Cookbook, Yara 12, Asiobatoon, Guybrush, Lynn Payne, M. Coy, Hazel Pup, Lake, Eva Knight, Mr. Cococo, Gwen T, Shay Theus, Melody Madeline No Surname, Neris, Sophia Lovelace, Sean Hamilton, Charlotte, Rio, Laura M, Atheist, Arda Aurelia, Grease Beef, Demise, Mia Maple, Nicole, George Rosenbaum, Neurofilter, Summer Celine Garnet Midnight, Big Time Jim, Darius Vazier, Almost Dead Again, David Kaiser, Cortisol, K, and Bo, yeah. This is getting too long, this patron read. Sorry if I messed up some names. It has been a very long time since I've had to record that. But I just thank you all for watching. Even more than most of my videos, it really means the world to me. And I'm speaking to you right now, the viewer. It really does mean the world to me that you watch this. I don't mean to go and garner parasocial relationships, but genuinely, thank you. Thank you for just letting me vent to you. Thank you for letting me get these problems off of my chest. All of you, individually. I really do mean it. Y'all are the reason that expressing myself is worth it. With that, I'm going to go work on the next video, which is probably going to be really political, so that's something we can look forward to. Y'all have a good one.